It was in a stifling early morning in Ouagadougou that President Ibrahim Traoré made the most shocking announcement in recent African history. We seized 30 billion francs in counterfeit money, dismantled the largest economic conspiracy against our country, and arrested 50 conspirators, including former ministers, influential businessmen, and foreigners. The press conference hall fell into a deathly silence as he held up a stack of counterfeit notes that, to the naked eye, were impossible to distinguish from the real ones. The crowd of journalists held their breath as Traoré pointed to the screen where the names of the implicated appeared, one by one. The conspiracy was infinitely larger than anyone could have imagined. It all began weeks earlier with an almost imperceptible detail that would forever change Burkina Faso's history. Aminata Sawadogo, a young central bank employee with trained eyes and sharp sensitivity, noticed something strange in the banknotes she handled daily. They had the exact texture, perfect coloration, and conventional watermarks. But a minute misalignment in the hologram's micro-details caught her attention. At first, she thought it might be a printing error, but upon gathering more samples, she realized it was no coincidence. She immediately took the material to her superior, the manager Jean-Claude Caboret. Caboret, a skeptical man hardened by years of service, dismissed the suspicion at first glance. However, Aminata's insistence and a deeper analysis revealed the terrifying truth. They were counterfeit notes of such high quality that they easily passed routine tests. Only highly specialized equipment could detect them. Pale-faced, Caboret understood the risk. If this information leaked, it could trigger a bank run, collapsing the country's financial system. Wasting no time, Caboret alerted the Minister of Finance, Laurent Gbagbo, who also felt the weight of the impending disaster. When informed, Ibrahim Traoré, known for his impetuosity and nationalist zeal, reacted with controlled fury. He slammed his fist on the table and roared, "This is not just counterfeiting, it's a declaration of economic war. They want to destroy our currency, impoverish our people, and take control of the country." Traoré immediately convened an emergency meeting of the National Security Council. Present were the key pillars of state defense: the Minister of the Interior, the Minister of Defense, the head of National Intelligence, and the central bank governor. The tension in the air was as thick as smoke. The head of intelligence, Commander Orago, was the first to shed light on the mystery. "Mr. President, we detected an abnormal increase in the amount of money circulating in the market. We couldn't pinpoint the source. Now it's clear. They're printing counterfeit money and injecting it into our economy to cause inflation and instability." The central bank governor confirmed, his voice trembling. "The money supply has skyrocketed in recent weeks. Now we know why." Traoré didn't hesitate. He gave an immediate order to form a task force comprising the best intelligence agents, financial experts, and special forces. "We won't rest until we eradicate this threat." Investigations began with an analysis of the paper used in the counterfeit notes. They quickly discovered that this specific type of paper wasn't produced in Burkina Faso, but had been imported recently. Customs records revealed a crucial clue. A shipment of high-quality security paper had entered the country in the past 6 months. Captain Ibrahim Diallo, an intelligence operations specialist, presented the evidence directly to the president. The paper was imported by a printing company called Prémarie Moderne, owned by François Ouedraogo, Diallo reported, adding, "And what's most curious, Mr. President, this man, until recently a discreet businessman, suddenly became a millionaire about 6 months ago. He bought a luxurious mansion, several expensive cars, and started mingling in elite social circles." Traoré's eyes burned with fury and determination. "Here's our lead. Put him under surveillance. I want to know who he meets, where he goes, what he eats, and what he breathes. But make sure he suspects nothing." And so it was done. For days, François Ouedraogo's life was meticulously observed. Every step tracked, every call intercepted, every meeting recorded. Until one silent night, François left his home in a black Jeep, heading toward the city's industrial zone. "Target on the move," reported a surveillance agent. Tension mounted. François drove to an old abandoned factory. Inside, the lights were on, and the sound of machines was audible. Commander Orago updated Traoré. "Sir, we have activity. It seems the machines are operational. Traoré personally took command of the operation. In a silent convoy, 20 Special Forces vehicles advanced without headlights along the dirt road, completely surrounding the factory. Attention! Everyone in position. No one escapes. They're likely armed, so be cautious, the president instructed. From outside, Traoré grabbed a megaphone and bellowed with authority. Attention! You are surrounded. Come out with your hands up. Do not resist. Silence. Only the hum of the machines, which gradually stopped. The lights went out. They're trying to destroy evidence, Traoré deduced. Without wasting time, he ordered, breach, but with caution. The doors were broken down. The Special Forces advanced with surgical precision. There was no armed resistance, but what they found inside was staggering. Tons of security paper, still warm printing presses, thousands of counterfeit notes scattered across the floor and shelves, trays with special inks and chemical components for large-scale production. Traoré, upon entering the site, paused and surveyed the scene with a mix of anger and triumph. Here is the scheme set up to destroy our country, he declared, his voice heavy with emotion. Captain Diallo approached, holding a folder, and reported, 12 arrests, including François Ouedraogo. But there's more, Mr. President. What? Traoré asked, impatient. Diallo opened the folder and revealed, a complete list. Names, payments, clients, it's all here. Traoré took the document, flipped through it, and paled as he read. This can't be, he murmured. Former ministers, parliamentarians, prominent businessmen, and even foreign figures. The president raised his head, eyes blazing with indignation. So that's it. It wasn't just counterfeit money. It was a plan to seize power in this country. At that moment, one of the detainees, Pascal Tapsoba, the printing company's technical manager, broke down in tears and begged to speak. They deceived us, he confessed. They said it was just regular printing. Then they threatened us. If we didn't cooperate, they'd kill our families. Traoré leaned toward him, eyes fixed. Who? Who gave the orders? Trembling, Pascal whispered, big bosses, foreigners. They said they'd collapse the economy and put one of their own in power. Give me names, Traoré demanded, unrelenting. And the names came, one by one, like precise blows, exposing the true magnitude of the conspiracy. Traoré stood, took a deep breath, and shouted to his men, arrest them all! No one sleeps tonight. By dawn, every name on this list will be behind bars. The order echoed through the silent early morning, and immediately, security force squads spread across Ouagadougou, raiding mansions, offices, and rural properties, detaining politicians, businessmen, public officials, and complicit foreigners. When the sun rose over the capital, 50 people had been arrested. Among them were names once considered untouchable in the country's political and economic elite. The population, waking to the news of the mass arrests, was stunned. The streets quickly filled with demonstrations in support of Traoré and in repudiation of the homeland's traitors. That historic morning, the president called a press conference, with stacks of seized counterfeit money displayed behind him like a trophy of national victory. Holding up one of the fake notes, he asked the journalists, look closely. Can you tell this note from a real one? The silence answered for them. Traoré continued, well, they printed 30 billion francs, enough to implode our economy and turn our people into paupers. The journalists, still incredulous, began firing frantic questions. One, bolder than the rest, asked, Mr. President, who could produce counterfeits of such quality? Traoré stared at the audience and, with a grave voice, replied, you'll see the names now. He pointed to the screen, which immediately displayed the full list of those involved. The room plunged into a sepulchral silence, broken only by gasps and expressions of shock from those present. Ministers, parliamentarians, tycoons, and, astonishingly, heavy international connections. He continued, this wasn't just an attempt to circulate counterfeit money. It was a coup orchestrated to destroy our currency, cause inflation, plunge the people into misery, and ultimately overthrow this government to replace it with a puppet regime. At that moment, a French journalist raised his hand and in a challenging tone asked, Mr. President, these are serious accusations. Do you have concrete evidence? Traoré smiled, but it was a cold smile. Evidence? he repeated. "We have the machines, the counterfeit notes, bank records, confessions. Everything is documented. This isn't a theory, it's a fact." They were caught red-handed. Outside the building, thousands of people had already gathered in support of the president. Signs reading "Burkina Faso will not kneel" and "Traitors to prison" were raised as they chanted patriotic songs. Meanwhile, interrogations of the detainees continued relentlessly. Pascal Tapsoba was the first to break the silence, confessing his coerced involvement. But the confession that most shook the investigators came from François Ouedraogo. After days of resistance, he finally broke. "Yes, we printed the counterfeit money, but I was coerced. They said if I didn't cooperate, my family would pay the price." "Who coerced you?" the prosecutor pressed. Ouedraogo took a deep breath and revealed. "The former Minister of Finance, Jérôme Carré, came to me. He said it was a patriotic plan to save the country from a dictator, that it was the only way to bring down Traoré." That testimony was enough for Traoré to call a new press conference. More incisive, tougher, more resolute. "Now everything is clear," he told the nation. "This conspiracy didn't originate here. It was planned outside our borders, funded by powers that want to see Africa on its knees, submissive." Raising folders of documents, he showed the evidence. $1 million bank transfers from Europe, from banks in Dubai, Switzerland, through layered accounts to hinder tracking. Correspondence detailing the volumes to be printed, deadlines and strategies for distributing the counterfeit money. "They wanted to destroy us with the most silent and dangerous weapon. Economic manipulation," he thundered. Meanwhile, new investigations expanded beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Interpol and African forces collaborated with the task force. In Abidjan, Ivory Coast, 3 clandestine printing presses were raided and shut down, with 20 people arrested. In Ghana, massive deposits of counterfeit money were found. In Togo, cells of the same network were dismantled. The investigations revealed that this conspiracy was just the tip of a much larger plot, an attempt to destabilize all of Francophone Africa, toppling nationalist governments and restoring former colonial influence. During one of the interrogations, former parliamentarian Robert Zongo made a bombshell confession. It wasn't just about counterfeiting money. The real goal was to create a simultaneous crisis in several West African countries. Inflation would explode, armies would revolt, and Western-aligned governments would take power. When asked who was leading this plan, Zongo, head bowed, whispered, "The same ones who always controlled us. Paris, Brussels, Washington." This statement sparked a wave of outrage across the continent. The people, seized by an unprecedented fury, took to the streets of Ouagadougou and various African cities, this time not only in support of Traoré, but as a cry against economic imperialism. Traoré then proposed something unprecedented, the creation of an African monetary community with security standards impossible for counterfeiters to replicate. "It's not enough to destroy the enemy," he declared. "We must also shield our economies." At an extraordinary meeting of the African Union, representatives from 54 countries endorsed the proposal. The African Monetary Security Commission was established. Traoré himself was appointed its president, recognized as a symbol of African resistance and sovereignty. While political decisions progressed, justice ran its course. On the 5th day of the operation, the first defendants were brought to trial. The charges were severe: treason, economic sabotage, financial terrorism. The evidence was irrefutable. Transaction records, printing presses, bank statements, and above all, spontaneous confessions. The international press, initially skeptical and trying to paint Traoré as a dictator, had to admit the reality. The counterfeit money existed, the arrests were legitimate, and the conspiracy was undeniable. On the 10th day of the operation, in a symbolic act broadcast live to the entire nation, Traoré personally threw the first counterfeit notes into a bonfire in the central bank's courtyard. The flames slowly consumed the 30 billion francs in fake money as the people, gathered in the squares, cheered and applauded. "This fire," Traoré declared before the cameras, "is not just burning paper, but also the system that tried to enslave us. It's the end of exploitation, the beginning of a new era for Africa." The central bank's security laboratory, created with the seized machines, became a continental reference. Young African engineers began developing new monetary security technologies there. Special inks, holograms, microtexts. What was once used to destroy would now be used to protect. Traoré, visiting the laboratory, was moved. Here is the true triumph. We turned the enemy's weapon into our defense. Africa will no longer be deceived, no longer be defeated. In his final public appearance before officially closing the operation, Traoré addressed the gathered people. This was the miracle we achieved together. We not only stopped a monstrous conspiracy, but awakened to who we are. A strong, united, sovereign Africa. The people responded in unison. Traoré! Traoré! And so, with the conspiracy dismantled, the traitors punished, and the economy saved, Ibrahim Traoré cemented his place in history as the leader who prevented his country's ruin and rekindled the spirit of unity across Africa. From that moment on, no attempt at subjugation would be tolerated. The victory over counterfeiting became a symbol of resistance, and the Burkinabe people, strengthened, began to confidently walk the path of self-determination. If there's one lesson the world learned from Burkina Faso, it's that even the most silent attacks can be overcome with courage, intelligence, and unity.